let's take a moment to think about what is happening in terms of storytelling in today's organization, and think about where you are. So as I'm going through these examples, kind of think about where are you situated, where is your organization situated. So one of the things that we see in storytelling today is that in many organizations, storytelling, and let me stop for a second. This is just a generalized approach. You might have more examples of other things that are happening. This is not exclusive to all organizations. These are some of the things that you see in today's, what is happening today in organizations as it relates to storytelling. So, like I said, you have isolated efforts where people thought, well, hey, it'd be a good idea to use storytelling, and maybe they do it in a lessons learned event, and they use stories as part of that. So it may be an isolated effort or somebody's pet project. Another thing that you see is that storytelling may be unidimensional, meaning that it appears only within a specific project or within a specific line of work for a short amount of time. So when I say unidimensional, then it doesn't affect other areas of the organization. It just happens in that one line. Another thing you see, as it says here, it's not tied to an institutional strategy, it's not long-term. So then when you think of those cases, you think of, well, what is the impact of storytelling? You don't think about how does that impact the organization as a whole over time, because it's not tied to a strategy. The other thing that I see, and this is one of the reasons why I wrote my book, is the lack of know-how. People talk about storytelling, but they think, well, but how do you actually do it? I can tell you in my experience, there was a time I remember working on a storytelling, I was doing a project in digital storytelling, and I was capturing stories. And I had a phone with me, and I was recording a story from an investigator who was telling me stories about investigating postal crime. And as he started telling this story, which was very, very interesting, he was talking about going through alleyways and et cetera. But what happened, he kept veering off. And that one plot veered off into like 4 different plots. And we did it like 3 or 4 times. We had to start the recording, stop, and start because he was going off. So I said, well, you know what you need to do? Let's just take a moment and have you write out the story. He wrote out the story, and then he was able to tell the story, staying in a consistent plot line, and we were able to make the recording in that way. I'm just giving you that as an example that even though we're all natural storytellers, but we live in a world where we tell stories, all of us carry our own stories, delivering a story, telling a story for a particular goal, for a particular task-related approach is not always an easy thing to do. So sometimes you need somebody or you need people that can help you through that process. So lack of know-how is one of the things that you see. Or sometimes the stories are maybe the approach may be ineffective, or it may be too abstract. So when I talk about storytelling, sometimes people say to me, well, is it about fairy tales? Is it sort of like bedtime stories? What do you mean by storytelling? So I have to take that moment where I have to put on my educator hat to explain to people what we mean when we talk about storytelling in an organizational context. And 2 more that you see in today's organizations. One is lack of a storytelling culture. And I want to take a minute to explain what I mean by lack of a storytelling culture. We all have stories, like I said in a blog I wrote on LinkedIn, we live in a storyverse, meaning that we're all surrounded by stories, like I said. We all carry stories. If you think about how you got here, what are the stories that that talk about how you got to be who you are today? We carry many stories with us. But when we talk about lack of a storytelling culture in an organization, what we mean is the lack of a framework in which that explains how you use stories to be impactful in that organization. Many organizations don't have that. They don't have a framework that says, this is how we use stories to transfer knowledge, to share knowledge. That lack of a framework for stories, to use stories in a way that is effective, that's what we talk about when we talk about a lack of a storytelling culture. And then lack of awareness or no visibility. People may be telling stories in the organization, but there is no visibility because those stories don't surface to a point where they can be captured and shared with the organization. And then the other thing is that, kind of similar to what we've mentioned before, is that maybe somebody has a storytelling event or a storytelling initiative, but it might not be as effective because it doesn't have as much impact. Or it might be just be localized to a specific instance or a specific action, and then that means that it doesn't transcend beyond that group. So these are some of the scenarios that you see in today's storytelling organization, and I want you to kind of think, well, where does your organization land in this spectrum? You know, maybe you are part of one of those organizations that are moving forward with storytelling, or maybe you're just starting.